Hi, welcome to Bookshore. This is my first episode, and today we're going to be talking about Samuel Delany's book, Nova. Now, Samuel Delany is a sci-fi author from the 60s, and I hesitate just to classify him as purely a sci-fi author. He, I've read three of his books, Nova, Babel 17, and the first one I read, which might have been a mistake, was Dahlgren. That's a really deep dive into Delaney, and kind of at the point where he starts getting out of sci-fi and more into literary fiction. But that's also a misnomer in the sense that Delaney, in my opinion, really toes the line. I think he's a really great middle ground between sci-fi and literary fiction, just like genre fiction and literary fiction, almost like what Pynchon does, and not attempts, but successfully does, but more integrated, I would say. Um, and what I mean by that, well, let's get into the plot of Nova. So there was two federations. I don't remember the names. I just read Babel 17 after this, so they were kind of similar in the characters. But one is pretty much quote unquote the Good Prince Federation, who runs the fuel economy in the universe, and the other one is the Prince and his sister, the Princess, who runs the transportation economy in the solar system. Now, what the plot of Nova is that the main prince, the main character, wants to override the system, and he wants to control the economy. He wants to take it away from his family friends who screwed him over when he was younger. We'll get to that. And he wants to do this with a new element called Irelium. Now, this is what I mean where the sci-fi genre elements come in, and they come in really well. Maybe not as much as books as Accelerando, but here are the concepts, and they're really cool. So, in this universe, because with the periodic table, we go from one to like whatever the beginning. I think like 192 or maybe 200s. As we know, the less protons and neurons in the atom, the more stable it is. And what Delaney proposes is that the more it adds on, it goes to zero and then past zero, to where the half-life becomes sustainable again. So like Californium and Einsteinium are just like half-lives are just like microseconds. And he would propose that it gets close to zero, it never touches zero, then it goes back. Okay, half-life microsecond, half-life few minutes, half-life a few hours, days, months, and boom, we're back to having a half-life of like hundreds of years, centuries, meaning that these elements are useful again. And one element like that within this book is Irelium, and I probably said that wrong, but whatever. And Irelium is an important substance because only a few grams of it can power machinery for centuries. Like you don't need that much of it in this multi-federational universe to totally upset it. And so what he wants to do is go inside of a nova, which will have the substance being made, and he'll gather several tons of that substance, meaning he will effectively solve the energy crisis throughout the universe. Outer worlds that don't have access to much energy or would be powerful enough to take on the Federation. His family's economic background just won't matter anymore because they'll be effectively useless. It'd be like having a country purely based off fossil fuels for their energy, and then bringing in solar energy to the point where everybody can power it. It'll just decimate the economy. And so that's the setup of the novel, and it's a really interesting setup. It's really cool. And then Delaney does something kind of like what Pynchon does. Like, here's the setup, but we're not going to focus on that. We're going to take a back seat, and it's like you're almost tricking you into like a character study. And the character study is where Delaney really shines, and a lot of his major themes come in. Now, what I mean by that is, and a little background to Delaney. Delaney is a gay man. I believe he might be bisexual. He was married to a woman who was very intelligent. She was like in Harvard as a teenager, so one of those people. In his early 20s, and now he's engaged in a homosexual relationship. He writes about his most recent book, The Spider's Nest, I believe it's called, writes about non-monogamous relationships. And so he's kind of in the LGBT field very sternly, even to the point where like his current husband, he says that he has a friends with benefits situation. I don't know if he'd describe it like that he's been with longer than his husband. So he's explored these alternate relationships, and that's where the core of Delaney's novels come in, where it's almost like a society that's past heteronormative in sexuality. So what do I mean by that? There's non-monogamous, there's bisexual relationships explored in this book, but very subtle, but not hidden, but very explicit at the same time. And I know that's very contradictory, but that's what I mean by post-heteronormative, in that you have characters like, for example, the captain and probably the second main character, if not the main character, is a gypsy boy. Actually, I probably call him the main character. And there's a scene where they're both in the captain's quarters, and he's playing his synth instrument, which we'll get to later, and he's just in between the captain's legs, and they're both just kind of sharing this moment. And it's like you can barely tell, like, yo, these dudes are totally into each other right now. There's a lot of tension, but Delaney doesn't bring a lot of attention to that. It's almost like it's just a part of the universe. Like, oh yeah, these characters like each other. Oh yeah, these characters. Oh, he also likes this person over here. Oh yeah, he has a relationship with these people. And that's what I mean post-heteronormative, where because it's not explicit because it doesn't have to be explicit. It's just part of society. It's not something the characters think twice about. And I believe even in this novel, or Babel 17, they even talk about that, how, actually I believe that was Babel 17, where a major part for the crew is that a non-monogamous relationship with about 3 people, and they talk about how strange it was that this king and queen hold to the old style of, not king and queen, but like, like royalty or just top statesmen, hold to the old style of, pairing off from one person to another person. And you see the characters like, oh, like they'll go for this person and then they'll go for that person, and it just Delaney's idea of love is it's not immutable. It's very fluid. It's very moving, and it doesn't lessen between each person. It's not like, oh, that person likes that person and that person, they're a harlot or a strumpet or something ridiculous like that. It's just showing us this is natural. This is what how humans go about it. And so you see that a lot in his books, and also just in the diversity of characters. You have a lot of characters. Now, I know I'm going to get this mixed up because, again, Nova and Babel 17, I read them like right next to each other. But you have characters like twins, or people who's black but who are albino, so they have white pale skin, but then their sister is still black. You have various different body types, different ethnicities throughout the book. And so it's really impressive how Delaney, an author in the 60s, in a lot of ways actually predicted what our culture would go through, also what we're trying to strive for right now. What we see in a lot of the LGBT movements, or what we see in people trying to get diversity, more into the mainstream of culture with movies and that discussion about representation. And Delaney was doing all of this in the 60s. Not only that, but he was also had some furry representation as well. He loves putting animal masks or holograms on his characters so they look like furries, much like Pynchon again with having his characters dress up in costumes. So when you go to Walmart and you see all the furry masks in the bin, Delaney was talking about that in the 60s already. That's very represented in Nova, where actually they go to a party and they put on those masks. So it's just kind of funny how much today's culture he predicted in a lot of sense. And that's where I feel like the more literary aspect of Delaney comes in, because you would think it would be like this high stakes game to let's get to the Nova as fast as possible. We got to get there before them. However, it takes a real slow, like, no, we have a few days. We can explore this. Like, the Nova is not gonna explode anytime soon. It becomes a character study at that, and a character study of not only how we as humans will be in the future, but we as humans now. What does it mean to be human right now? Now let's go on to the next part of it, because this is a sci-fi book, so let's talk about the technology. Delaney explores a few interesting things, some a little cheesy. One, he explores like this instrument that can, it's kind of like a weird gypsy accordion where it's powered by beryllium, like I said earlier, so it can last forever, and it makes sense and it makes images while you play. And another character is a gypsy who we introduced at the beginning of the book, who lived on Earth and has learned multiple languages and eventually becomes part of the crew. And it's just delving into how art will be represented in the future. Now, there might be some truth to this, might not be. It just depends how we humans view art as. We seem to go away from multimedia work in some sense. But like one thing, like other YouTuber Adam Neely said, and I've experienced this in my own forays into music, is that music really hasn't progressed since like the 60s and 70s itself. We're always trying to go for that natural tone. Even my recording arts teachers were like, hey, don't put pedals, don't put anything, don't do direct in, get the purest tone out you can as possible. And so this would be an interesting viewpoint into like, what if we could make music videos on the fly? What if we can make sense on the fly? What if we explored purely non-diegetic music, meaning music that's not found in our natural acoustic space, but music that's only can be represented through computers. And, you know, so that's an interesting explanation there. And some get cheesy. I remember there was a quick statement there where he talks about, like, there's no more germs in the universe anymore. I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool, because they're just eating off the floor and have their shoes off. And I remember telling my friend about that. Like, yeah, man, one part of the book they say they have no more germs. Like, that's kind of sci-fi. I'm like, yeah, you're right. That's a little ridiculous. But, you know, that's just a small part of the book. Again, the main part of the technology in the book is the fuel crisis in the universe with the beryllium, and that just kind of really adds more of a aspect that we can understand. So I'd recommend Delaney's book, Nova. I'd recommend it to 3 camps. One, if you're somebody like more like me who is more on the literary side and wants to get more into sci-fi, this is a good in-between point. Finding that balance instead of going to something, you know, like the Moonmen or Burroughs, which I have and just haven't read. Or also, I would recommend this more to the sci-fi reader who wants to go from, you know, sci-fi to more literary fiction. This Delaney's a great bridge point. And also, I'd recommend it maybe to sci-fi readers who want to go for more of the fantastical side of sci-fi, the more Star Warsies, into the more procedural stuff. I think Delaney would be a great aspect for that, because not only the concept that he introduces in the books and whatnot, but the style he introduces. What he tends to do a lot is, you know, he'll show a setting, he'll show action, and then he'll describe it later. He does like to play around with language a lot. I believe in this book also, he has a section, let me see if I can find it. That might be more be in Babel 17, where he talks about more it's more like a dream sequence and like just like almost like a modernist kind of thing, where it's more stream of consciousness, broken fragments. A lot that you'll see in, you know, higher literary books, where they don't like to present the whole thing to you, but you can infer a lot of what's going on. So that is my review of Delaney. If you have any comments or suggestions of anything I might have missed on the book, I know I didn't talk about the main character who sees a nova at the beginning of the book, but that's at the beginning. Leave a comment down below. Tell me what books of Delaney I should read in the future. I do want to read The Spider's Nest. I have A City of a Thousand Suns, and I'm going to read Triton someday. But if you have any sci-fi authors that are similar to him, or the like, you know, let me know in the comments. Let me know what your favorite are, because sci-fi is still an unexplored genre for me, and I'm trying to delve more into it. So I love this to be more of a discussion channel than just a review channel. So let me know, and